Babes in Spyland. The Truth Hurts. Episode 7. Whoa! The man put his hands in the air. Agent Smith should say something, but she was distracted by a pair of dark green eyes. The man's gaze moved from the gun to Agent Smith's neck, down over her curves, and then all the way back up. Normally this would annoy her, but was that a blush she felt coming on? Nope. She shook the sensation away. When his attention finally returned to her eyes, he grinned. Didn't know I was interrupting. Agent Smith sighed and lowered her weapon. She pulled her badge out and thrust it forward. Just a routine search, sir. Sorry about the gun. No problem. His eyes dipped to Agent Smith's blouse. Is your search over? Hell yes, it was. I'm finished. She kept her smile in place and moved past him before he could say anything else. Agent Milkshakes met her coming around the corner. Anything? They both asked one another at the same time. Yes, they both said. Agent Smith shut her mouth. Milkshake's phone rang. She motioned to the SUV before answering. Did you get it? They climbed in, and Milkshakes rattled off some coordinates, which Agent Smith barely input into the GPS before Milkshakes thanked the caller, hung up the phone, and peeled out of the parking lot. What did you find? Agent Smith asked. Sci-Fi was here. He came in, got the key, hung out in the bathroom until the car arrived to get him, and then left. The only reason the manager remembered him was because he didn't return the key. The lack of pants didn't do it for him? I guess that kind of thing happens here all the time. Agent Smith shook her head. What is the world coming to? Where are we headed? Milkshakes asked, pointing to the GPS. Oh, she looked down. Get on the highway, going north. Can I ask why we're driving to these coordinates? Milkshakes made the turn onto a main road. After someone rescued Sci-Fi, a carload of guys came in asking about him. The vehicle he left in managed to avoid the cameras, but the second one didn't. I got the license plate from the surveillance tape and called it in. The car should be at those coordinates. Agent Smith processed this as she shoved the shirt into an evidence bag and put that into her pocket. Do we know anything about them? And did the manager say anything about the vehicle Sci-Fi left in? Maybe and nope. But I've got a tech group coming out to review the surveillance tapes from the gas station and the surrounding buildings. What do you mean, maybe? Agent Smith asked, as they skidded around a corner and accelerated onto the freeway. The license plate checks out as a car our foreign friends rented. Agent Smith let that sink in. So we're about to interact with who? Turks. Milkshakes took the SUV around a moving roadblock of semi-trucks. Turks? Agent Smith had learned very little about the foreign affairs of the super-secret agency in her 3 days of training. They come around every year with a plan to thwart the eating of turkeys on Thanksgiving Day, Milkshake said. A whole slew of questions emerged from that revelation, but Agent Smith beat them back and started with, what would they want with Sci-Fi? Food sense? More likely the interrogation scent. Glancing down at the GPS, Agent Smith said, exit here and go left. They got off the freeway, turned, flew through several red lights, and darted around a group of kids playing soccer in the street, and into a warehouse district of low, squat, cinder block buildings. Agent Smith studied the GPS, then pointed. That one. Agent Milkshakes drove behind the warehouse next to their target and parked. Come on, let's see what we can see. Shouldn't we call for backup? Agent Smith asked. Already done. Milkshakes got out of the SUV and drew her gun. Agent Smith did the same. They ran along the rear of the building and sprinted across the alley. Several cars occupied the stalls near the main door, and Agent Milkshakes jerked her head at a dark green sedan. That's our mark. Agent Smith spotted a ladder. Should we try the roof? Milkshakes followed Agent Smith's gaze, thought for a moment, then shook her head. Getting back down inside might be a problem. Let's split up on the ground and find a way in. They split up. Agent Smith jogged along the side of the building, staying close to the walls. No doors, windows, or even drain holes from the roof adorned the first side. But the second revealed 2 bay entrances and a person-sized door with a small window in it. Adrenaline pumping, she crept forward and peered inside. A few dim lights hung from the ceiling, providing just enough illumination to see by. Dust covered everything. Rows of shelves, an old forklift, broken crates, and the floor. The floor. She stood on tiptoe and looked down. Sure enough, clear footprints led from the door to the left. Taking a breath, Agent Smith touched the handle. Should she go in before knowing more? That decision was made for her as heavy footsteps sounded from behind and around the corner. With nowhere to hide, she turned the handle and moved inside. The unmistakable sound of several weapons being cocked caught her attention. 4 broad, tall men in cheap suits and dark sunglasses stood on either side of the door, where they had been out of her line of sight when she looked in. The 2 who ran up behind her made it a half-dozen total. Each of them was armed with a handgun, which were all pointed at her heart. "Well, well," a heavily accented voice echoed through the building. "What have we here? The other half of the team, hm?" 2 large men, also dressed like the other goons, came toward her. Agent Smith slowly put her hands up, her gun still in her grasp. The 2 guys parted, revealing yet another shady-looking character, this one sporting a battered fedora, and dragging Agent Milkshakes by one arm. Milkshakes looked more annoyed than intimidated. "We told you we would find her." His long, pointed face drew up into a smile. The only change in expression Agent Milkshakes gave was a slow blink. "What are you looking for?" the man asked. Agent Smith decided she would call him Boris. His minions, they had to be minions, stood their ground, guns pointed at her, lips frowning. All in unison. Pretty good coordination, really. Neither agent spoke. "You will tell me, or I will have my men put extra holes into your friend." Boris tightened the grip on Agent Milkshake's arm, which caused her to rise up on her toes. Despite the pain his fingers were likely causing on her bicep, Milkshakes rolled her eyes. Agent Smith didn't like this guy threatening her partner. He didn't even have a good hat on. Thinking a distraction would be nice, she said, "I might have something you're looking for." "And what would that be?" Boris asked. "If I may?" Agent Smith lowered her hand that wasn't holding her gun and pointed at her pocket. "One wrong move and you both die," Boris said in a bored tone. "I found this in the bathroom." Agent Smith slowly pulled the shirt sleeve she'd retrieved from the gas station out of her jacket pocket. She held the bag in 2 fingers, as if it were filthy. Apparently, it was what they'd been looking for. Boris's jaw dropped open, and when it did, Agent Milkshakes elbowed him in the face. Agent Smith didn't bother to watch her partner after that. Instead, she threw the evidence bag in the air. They still had the torn section from the fence in the SUV, then ducked, just in case one of the minions was dumb enough to shoot where they might hit one of their buddies. Before the bag reached the apex of her toss, she was running toward the nearest goon. Hand-to-hand combat wasn't Agent Smith's strongest area, but she knew a thing or two about fighting. She'd learned to go in fast, hit hard, and don't hold back. She kicked the first man in the groin. He went down in a satisfying heap. The guy next to him trained his weapon on her, but she batted it aside and kicked him in the shin with her heel. He dropped his weapon and went down howling. She punched the next guy as hard as she could in the stomach. Her fist either met body armor or a very ripped set of abs. He grunted, but didn't bend over. He had nice eyes. She kicked out again. This time the guy moved, but she used the space to her advantage and dove between 2 of her assailants, rolling on the ground and coming back up to her feet, gun still in her hand, and now pointed at her attackers. Boris lay on the ground, groaning. Agent Milkshake stood above him, his own gun aimed at his head. "You boys care about this guy?" she asked, placing a foot on the back of his neck and leaning closer. The goons stopped. "One move and he's gone. At the very least, you don't get paid." Agent Smith continued to step backward, away from the group, trying to ignore her appreciation for the cut of the guy's suit in front of her. Her sudden distractibility due to men had to be Sci-Fi's pheromones. "Now I want you to lay your weapons on the ground, nice and slow," Milkshake said. No one moved. Before Agent Milkshakes could say more, the sound of squealing tires came from outside. Someone muttered a curse. Agent Smith turned to see an assault van crash through one of the bay doors, causing a loud boom and sending screaming metal everywhere. The muzzle of a gun protruded out of the van window. Down! Agent Smith yelled. Everyone dove to the ground. Agent Milkshakes indicated for Agent Smith to go to her right. She rolled in that direction, just as the gunfire began. The buzz of a bullet zinged past Agent Smith's ear. Bits of concrete exploded around her. She kept rolling, knowing that a moving target was harder to hit. Get them, Boris shouted. Do not let them escape. Was he talking to his men about the super-secret agents? Or was he talking to his men about the van? Or was he talking to the people in the van? The gunshots stopped. So Agent Smith rolled to her stomach one last time and rose to a crouch. A different weapon muzzle pointed at them from the van. The enormous barrel could have shot cigars out of it. All of the men around her appeared to be down, but the lack of blood made her frown. Watch it. Agent Milkshakes grabbed her by the arm and tugged her to the right. A dart, about 6 inches long, with a white body and red fletching feathers, hit the ground at her feet and bounced away. Come on, Agent Milkshakes said, still pulling. I take it that's not our backup? Nope, those little darts are a Greenland specialty. 4 larger darts, these black with white fletching, flew past them and embedded themselves into the forklift. What kind of darts could penetrate metal? Run, Agent Milkshake said. Agent Smith didn't argue. They bolted for the nearest set of shelves. They'd only taken a few steps when an explosion ripped through the air behind them. A wave of heat singed Agent Smith's back, followed by an invisible force that threw both agents to their hands and knees. Her ears rang and the world started to spin. Agent Smith shook her head, trying to clear it. Agent Milkshakes said something. What? Agent Smith shouted back. She could hardly hear her own voice. The word "what" played out on Agent Milkshake's lips, but all Agent Smith heard was a muffled blob of sound. More darts flew past them, these from a band of men in camouflage coming through the shelves. Both agents scrambled to their feet. Agent Smith took one step, then another, but the ground pitched beneath her and darkness gathered at the edges of her vision, ready to pounce. Oh, great, she thought. My first day on the job, and I pass out and faceplant. The dusty concrete rose to meet her oncoming nose. Her hands refused to spring out in front of her. Wasn't that supposed to be one of those involuntary reactions? She resigned herself to her fate, being knocked out by hitting the ground nose first, but it never quite happened. All at once, the gray sea before her stopped, getting closer. She blinked. Maybe she was unconscious. That would explain the lack of impact. She didn't mind. Then the world righted itself, and she found a man next to her. He pulled her arm over his rather broad shoulders and dragged her to her feet. She tried to focus on his face, but couldn't quite get the 3 of them to coalesce into one. Blinking didn't help. Shaking her head made everything worse. She tried to talk, but if anything came out, she didn't hear it. Her eyes managed to swing their way over to where Agent Black Turtle was pulling Agent Milkshakes to her feet. He waved at the guy who had Agent Smith and pointed to his right. Moving, she decided at once, was bad. Her feet tangled with themselves, and her stomach started to heave back and forth like a tiny ship in a big storm. She briefly entertained the idea that this guy might be a bad guy, but with him listening to Black Turtle, not to mention that now with only 2 faces he was pretty hot, she wouldn't bother to put up a fight, because you weren't supposed to fight off the rescue party, right? That's what she kept trying to tell herself, but the idea got lost and dribbled out of her ear about halfway through, forcing her to start again. An SUV loomed before them. The 10 feet between Agent Smith and the vehicle stretched to a mile. She felt like she was in a fun house with those stupid mirrors that distorted everything. Maybe she would be taller when she woke up. Then the ground pitched beneath her feet again, or something hit her from behind, or both, because she and the man helping her went down in a heap. She hit face first, so much for the earlier save. The man curled around her and she felt the heat from some sort of explosion whipping past them. The world started to go black. Agent Smith felt herself being rolled over, and her knight in shining armor's face at last resolved into blue eyes, long red hair, a square jaw, and lips that made her want to kiss them. Stupid pheromones. It was probably good that darkness crowded her vision, and she fell into oblivion.